Oh, what's going on? What's going on? So we've heard a lot of news lately. A lot of news that pertains to the Terrence Crawford versus Earl Spence fight. Um, One of the things we first heard was it was a couple of days ago. They were talking about um, the fact that that the fight was still in talks. That Keith Thurman was not somebody that they were looking at, and the fact that the two entities, as far as Fox and Showtime, were had comparable or whatever, bids for the fight. So they were both basically trying to bid for the fight, which some people try to say was a bidding war or whatever it is as it pertains to the bout. We kind of first heard that, and then we heard that there's a set date of November 19th where Earl Spence is going to fight on that date, or with or without Terrence Crawford. It's going to be up to him, and what exactly he wants to do. Um, we heard that as well. And then the next day, we also heard that the fight was confirmed. That the fight is done and that they were going to be having it on the 19th, or they didn't know the location yet, but they're saying it's in Vegas, and that it's going to be, I guess, like a 60-40 towards Earl Spence's way, and that, if Terrence Crawford was to win, or whoever won, the loser. It's a bilateral rematch clause where whoever lost, they have the right to say to request a rematch, and in that rematch, that whoever the winner was would get a 60-40 split. And that was the news that supposedly all the main parts were situated, and they were just looking at the jargon, and then for some reason he names the Earl Spence's lawyer's name, but doesn't name Terrence Crawford's lawyer, and they're supposed to both be looking at this paperwork and trying to get clear up the language, but somehow the paperwork's just with Earl Spence's lawyer. It didn't make any sense, and especially with that guy, that's Coppinger that came out with that information, and Coppinger has been wrong a lot, especially when it comes to this event. Supposedly, this fight was also happening in October, which obviously that still wasn't the case. He's been wrong a lot, so unfortunately, he's not someone that you can really take his information. Yeah, you keep jumping, 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 jumping. Eventually, yeah, you're gonna be right. You know what I mean? Eventually, you're gonna be right if you keep speaking, 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 and you're wrong, wrong, wrong. Eventually, you're gonna possibly hit the right month, or hit the right, or whatever it is. So even when it comes to him, it's kind of like, he's not necessarily a source that I'm gonna go with. And there was another report that said that supposedly, that the fight was done, that Terrence Crawford had already signed his part, that it was a 65-35 split. There was a 65-35 split, and that as far as, Earl Spence's way, and that even if there were to have a rematch, that it would still be Earl Spence's way, and that Terrence Crawford was getting no upfront money. So pretty much, only thing he'd be getting is a back end. He wouldn't be getting any kind of pay whatsoever. Now, if anybody's watched any of my videos, I don't care what anybody says. I always just go by the history of people. I go by the history. If I'm talking about top rank Bob Arum, I go by their history and how they've done things. I don't care who the person is. I don't care even if it's Bob Arum himself saying something. I'll call bullish on it. If it comes to the zone, Eddie Hearn, I don't care who's involved. I don't care what anybody says. I'm gonna flow with things depending on their history and how they do things. I don't care what anybody says. So when it comes to this particular situation, it's kind of like the same thing with me when it comes to, I have to look at Terrence Crawford and I have to look at PBC. Now, when it's come to PBC, if you look at everybody that's worked with him, they all have nothing but positive things to say about them. Even deals where people walked away from deals, you've never seen one of those deals and said, that's a BS deal. When Anthony Joshua walked away from the Deontay Wilder, what he was offered, there was nothing BS about that. When Canelo just walked away from the offer he was given, there was nothing BS about that. The deal that Gennady Golovkin was given to fight Jamal Charlo, that he walked away from, that 2-fight deal, $14 million for a bum fight on Showtime, then $24 million guaranteed for him to fight Jamal Charlo. He walked away from that. It's a great deal. Munguia, he agreed to the deal that was set for him to fight Jamal Charlo. He just walked away from it. because of his camp or whatever. They said, now we want to, it has to be on the zone, and so it has to be a part of it, even though we're not putting up any money or whatever it is. So when you look at people like, if you look at people like the UFC, Dana White, he thought it was going to be an issue with dealing with them, but he said, nah, it was great. It was great working with them, great working with Al Heyman, great working with, with that organization. So this is the history of Miguel Cotto. It's the same thing. He had nothing but positive things to say. Everybody that's worked with them, nothing but positivity when it's come to them negotiating. So to then, I can believe the 65-35. That's something absolutely you can believe. But to think that they're gonna put him in Terrence Crawford into a position where he wouldn't be getting any upfront money, knowing their history and seeing how they do business, that just doesn't make sense whatsoever. It absolutely doesn't make any sense. And especially when it comes to things like Espinoza. I believe they talked to Espinoza, and because they had asked him, because there was rumors out there that, Terrence Crawford's been offering substantially less money than he had gotten before. And they said that wasn't the case, that his guarantee was, I guess they were saying that was his biggest guarantee that he was being offered. So that kind of makes me think, that's another thing. When you just look at everything that pertains to PBC, everything that pertains to Al Heyman, everything that pertains to Espinoza, it just doesn't make sense. The 65-35, that makes a lot of sense. Makes absolutely a lot of sense. But everything else is kind of like, especially when it comes to the monetary aspect of it and how much money you would get. Now, you look at somebody like, now, you got to look at Terrence Crawford. You got to look at his history and how he does things. He's been a hardcore businessman, especially later on in his career. That's why he was getting those funds that he was getting from ESPN. He's all about guaranteed money. He's on some F the back end ish. He wants that upfront money. That's why he stayed with Top Rank. If he was to go to PBC, they're going to give you a small amount of money, and you're making most of your bread in the back end. It can end up being a substantial amount of money, but it's not a risk that Terrence Crawford wanted to take. He does not like taking risks like that. He'd rather have this guaranteed funds. And that's why he signed that multi-fight deal. He knew he didn't have to promote. He didn't have to say anything. He didn't have to do anything. He knew he was getting this bread, period. And he got it on time. He knew even if I don't fight, you guys still pay me, And so that's why he took that deal. So when you look at that, it really doesn't make any sense that he would take a deal where it's all about risk. Everything is back end. It goes completely against what he's basically been doing in his career, especially in the latter part of his career. And he has some hardcore negotiators that are with him, hardcore negotiators with him. So just seeing, especially his recent past, especially with the last contract that he did with Top Rank and how he's been moving and maneuvering, I don't see how you would do something like that. Just take a deal where he's not getting any money up front. And he's not someone that's desperate. He's not someone that needs those funds. He's somebody that's been very smart and very intelligent with his money. He's been investing a lot of his money. People might be actually shocked to see how much real estate that dude probably owns. That's why he talks, even when it came to Sean Porter, and he asked Sean Porter, he's talking business with him. What kind of real estate? So I got a couple of things. And he's like, buy more. Buy more. You can never have too much. So he's all about that. So he knows about Warren Buffett is also a good friend of his that he talks to on a regular basis. So he's very smart and very intelligent with his money. So finances isn't a thing with him. So I just don't see him making a business move like that. There is a weird case where he could, quote, not be getting upfront money as far as him as the fighter. Like I remember when Jermell Charlo, when he took on Erickson Lubin, his actual check was only $70,000. But obviously, Lions Promotions, whatever promotional company he's got the back, got a huge part, of those funds. He got in the back, he got a nice fat check, obviously, whatever, I don't know how many millions it was. And PBC does do that. You'll see a fighter get $1 million, $1.2 million, but he's really gotten paid $3 million for that fight. $4 million for that fight. And people say, and we know this because PBC got sued, by Top Rank and by Golden Boy, and they had to pull out all this information to pull out these records that show that that's actually is what they're doing. But like the judge said, the Muhammad Ali Act is not meant for promotional companies. It's meant to protect the fighters, and those fighters don't need any protecting, because clearly they're being taken care of. So we know they do that, where people have no idea what they actually make. So what I'll basically say is that there are people out there that do have quote sources, and they believe their sources, but those sources lately haven't really been coming. The information hasn't been panning out. I will say that, but some people still believe in these sources. And so I'm not saying anything. Even Coppinger, yeah, he's a lying sack of ish. You don't know what the hell he's talking about. Pugmire, you don't know what the hell they're talking about. But other people, they really do have sources, and they believe in the things that are being told to them. But I just believe, especially with the last information that was given out, I just think some things you got to just hold on to. Like, somebody's giving you certain information, but like, you know what? I don't know about that one. It just doesn't sound right. So let me just keep this in my pocket. If it ends up being true, all right, cool. But I'd rather just be that than just put out this information and be false. So I just think that's probably what this particular situation was. One of those, let's just keep it in the pocket and see what happens with this whole thing. But I'm not saying that the fight's not happening. What I'm basically just saying is we should kind of just sit back, relax, and see what happens. Because there's been too much misinformation that's been going on as it pertains to this fight. And I just think a lot of these sources, they don't have information on this fight like that. I just don't think they do. But there's people who probably been working with certain people and have known people for a while. So they're still going to believe them, They're still going to believe the information that's being given to them. And I guess they believe it's strong enough for them to put it out, But just looking at the history of PBC, looking at the history of Espinosa, looking at the history of Terence Crawford, especially recently, and how he does his business, and he has his attorneys, he got his marketing company, he got a lot of people, strong people in this corner, and I just don't see them putting him into a space where he takes a deal like that. And especially with, what he's all about. He's all about that upfront. He's not even about that back end like that. I guess what they call it, risk adverse. That's what he is. So he'd rather take this guaranteed $4 million or $5 million than take one and only get $1 million in the back end or $2 million in the back end than get $1 million in the back end and have the opportunity to make it 10 in the back end. Get $1 million up front with the opportunity of making 10 in the back end. Nah, he wants that up front. But we'll see what happens with everything. Hopefully this fight is done. Hopefully it gets made. Bernie the Boxer, he came on, did a show, and he supposedly talked to Terence Crawford and quote Terence Crawford signed the contract. But then it's, now it's on Earl Spence's end. It's all on them. But that could be a term sheet or whatever. You making changes and you signing something and sending it to them might not be the actual official contract being signed. So hopefully this fight is done. Hopefully they both sign. And hopefully we get this bout that we wanted. But I personally have to be skeptical just because of everything that's been going on with this particular fight. I can't just take anybody at their word. I don't care what anybody says, to be honest, from A to Z, but hopefully this fight does get done, and hopefully we get the fight that we wanted. Hopefully it is on November 19th. Hopefully, if not, I don't care. If it's on January, February, cool, because I was thinking if it was to happen, it'd be in February. But the fact that they're all still quiet, they're all still not saying anything. No one's talking negative about each other or anything like that. It's an absolutely great sign. Great sign. So I guess we'll see. Like, subscribe, share. I'm out.